Good evening, dear listener. Tonight, we return once more to the quiet folds of history. If you're cozy in bed or simply letting your thoughts drift away, you're in the right place. I'd love to know, where are you listening from tonight? Now, close your eyes, let the present fall away. And imagine this: the Nile glistening under a pale sky, a carved board game resting beside a sleeping tomb. You feel the wind first warm, dry, and laced with the faint scent of crushed lotus and ancient resin. Sand shifts beneath your sandals as you walk along the narrow path leading out of the workers' village. It's late afternoon, and the sun has begun its gentle descent, gilding the limestone cliffs in soft amber light. They whisper something you can't quite hear: stories of movement, of strategy, of hope. You see him in your mind's eye, cloaked in linen, fingers stained with ink. A scribe, maybe, or an overseer of grain. He sits beside his wife as the sun sets, the Nile gleaming in the distance. Together, they murmur prayers between each roll of the sticks. But here, beside the tomb, in its forgotten game, the air is hushed. You trace one last square with your fingertip, the house of happiness, the final destination. It's slightly deeper than the others, as if countless fingers once pressed it for luck. The Egyptians believed that joy could be built into eternity. You breathe in the scent of dust, stone, and distant water. The breeze carries the murmur of ancient words. And for a moment, you are not in the present at all. You are exactly where you were meant to be. Square 30 of the board. At rest, at peace, quietly victorious. Their laughter, light and unsure, echoes between the stone blocks. They play not only for amusement, but for reassurance that when the time comes, when the heart is weighed and the soul must pass through perilous gates, they will be ready. You wonder if they believed the gods watched them play, or if, in the end, they simply needed to feel less alone. For the Egyptians, this wasn't a game of idle fun. You pick one up, run your fingers along its curves. You imagine the small rituals people once held before a game, rubbing the stick ends for luck, whispering a name of protection under their breath, choosing which token would be their ba, the soul's image. Every person who played Senate infused it with meaning. It was never just about winning. It was about moving forward, square by square, one careful decision at a time. And maybe that's why so many boards were found with inscriptions, tiny prayers etched into the wood. May I pass? One reads. May I find peace? Says another. Every square marked a challenge the soul might face after death. Some were blessings, safety, guidance, favor from the gods. Someone, perhaps a descendant, visited not long ago. They left a sprig of dried papyrus tucked into a crevice near the Dora gesture of memory. As you turn your gaze back to the game, you notice something strange. One of the pieces has been moved, just one square forward. Perhaps the wind nudged it. Perhaps in the deep logic of Egyptian belief, the game continues even in stillness. The dead, after all, were never truly gone. You feel a calm settle in your chest, not fear, but something else. They simply changed the rules. As if the game beneath your fingers belongs to you now too, somehow. As if by being near it, you're helping the soul it represents continue its passage. Others were traps, serpents in the dark, waters too deep, doors that would not open. To win was not simply to reach the final square, it was to navigate a vision of the underworld and emerge whole. Children played it, so did scribes. Even the dead, it seems, were expected to carry on the game. Senate boards were carved onto tomb walls. Others were buried with the deceased, so they'd never play alone. You follow the slope down toward the Valley of the Kings, but not to the grand tombs carved for pharaohs. Your steps are guided toward a smaller resting place, modest, half-finished, but loved. Just beyond the reach of temple shadows, nestled near a low hill, sits the tomb of a nobleman whose name is mostly lost to time. Nothing stirs. Only the hieroglyphs carved above the lintel remain. A falcon, a reed, and a curling fish. Symbols no longer spoken, yet still present, still waiting. You crouch beside the entrance. The stones here are quiet, but they're resting on a flat patch of sun-warmed rock is something unexpected. A board game. It lies just as it was left, its surface carved with 30 neat squares, polished smooth by long-forgotten hands. A few game pieces remain. Tiny pawns made of ivory and lapis lazuli, their shapes weathered by the wind. You recognize it, though you've never seen it before. It is sent at the game of passing. And whether you're a laborer or a priest, a mother or a monarch, you know what it means to sit beside someone you love. Roll the casting sticks and try to win your way toward eternity. You place your hand on the board. The squares are warm. The breeze shifts, and you imagine a man once sat where you do now, perhaps the noble whose tomb this is. Far off, you hear the faint sound of voices, workers heading home, children laughing near the edge of the canal. A handful of smooth stones still sit beside the board. Behind you, the tomb lies cool and dark. The scent of burnt myrrh lingers near its entrance. The sun is lower now, painting everything in gold. The heat deepens as the midday sun rises over Deir el-Medina, the village of artisans who carve tombs for kings. You walk the winding path between sun-baked walls, where each house leans slightly toward the next, as if seeking shade. The air smells of chalky stone and baked grain, and the light is almost too bright to look at. Behind you, the sounds of chisels echo faintly against the cliff step. Tap, pause, then a murmur, a joke, a laugh. Yet carved into the steps of its entrance where sandals scuff each morning are game boards etched deep into the limestone. Archaeologists found them centuries later and wondered, why here? Why beside a holy place? But the answer is simpler than it seems. To the Egyptians, the sacred and the playful were not opposites. That balance is not something achieved once, then held forever. A gust of wind scatters two of the stones from their places. One rolls to your foot. You pick it up and, without quite knowing why, return it to its square. A simple gesture. Yet somehow it feels respectful, like resetting the world. A game played and paused, not ended, not forgotten, just waiting until the next hand picks up the piece. The sun presses harder now, and the shadows shrink. But the laughter in the alley returns, brighter than before. And for a moment, you feel the balance tilt again toward joy. It is a practice, a repeated act. Just as each move must be considered, so too must each word, each step, each offering. The games are not diversions. They're lessons in patience, in foresight, in knowing when to act and when to wait. In a land ruled by seasons and floods where the river gives and the desert takes, these were the skills that mattered. To play was to prepare. A game could honor the gods just as surely as an offering. To play with skill was to show mastery. To laugh well was to honor Hathor, the goddess of joy. Even the act of gathering in peace beneath the sun, with nothing to win but pride, was a quiet form of worship. But here, just outside the narrow alley where the plasterers wash their hands, someone has drawn a board game in the dust. You pass a doorway where a man carves a miniature game set out of discarded wood. Beside him, a little girl points to the squares, asking questions about the rules. The man answers patiently, then lets her take a piece and try. Her hands tremble slightly as she moves it forward. And suddenly you wonder how many generations learned strategy, patience, and grace from these dusty games. How many fathers taught their children, not through lectures, but through playful competition? How many lost on purpose, just enough to build confidence before setting down the rules again? The lines are crisp, the squares neat. A finger, or perhaps a stick, traced them not long ago. Between them is a circle drawn in the earth. Small bones and stones form patterns inside it. They aren't speaking, but their eyes flick between each other, watching, waiting. The game is serious now. Maybe they've wagered something, a bit of bread, a carved amulet, the right to choose water first. But even without stakes, the intensity remains. You sense how deeply invested they are. Not in the objects before them, but in the rhythm, the control, the quiet joy of matching wits in the open air. A stone sits on one of the corners, waiting to be moved. You crouch beside it, the warm earth pressing into your knees. The game is not Senate. This time it's 20 squares, one of the simpler games known to both nobles and workers. Somewhere, a woman calls out to her son, reminding him not to forget the bread. You close your eyes and imagine a different version of this place. Not one of heat and stone, but of celebration. Perhaps during a rare day of rest, this alley fills with neighbors, each one bringing a game of their own. One rolls knucklebones, while another teaches a child to stack palm seeds. There are contests, dares, songs, sung between turns. The games are not just for children. Grown men stoop to join in. Elder women watch, smiling quietly. You realize suddenly that this play is not separate from life. It is life made lighter. The rules are half forgotten, half imagined. No carved board, no gold inlay here, just dust and a few pebbles for tokens. But even so, it carries weight. You pick up one of the stones and feel the ridges worn into it by many fingers. Somewhere behind you, two boys argue over a rule, then burst into laughter. In this moment, the difference between a noble's inlaid game and a worker's dusty version disappears. The spirit of play, of competition, of laughter, of temporary escape, needs no gold leaf to thrive. A breeze curls through the alleyway, carrying with it the distant scent of bitumen and fresh-cut wood. Just beyond the alley's edge is the workers' chapel, a place of offerings and remembrance. As you rise and walk through the village, your feet stir soft clouds of dust. Further on, near the edge of the village where the slope leads down to the desert plain, two men sit in the sand, legs crossed, heads bowed, and perhaps it is here, beneath this hard sky, in the stillness between words, that you glimpse the real lesson hidden in their games. You look down again at the dust-drawn board behind you. At sunset, the air along the Nile softens. What was once sharp with heat and glare becomes golden, glowing, slow. Children weave between the legs of merchants and mothers, laughing, shouting, balancing flatbread in one hand and figs in the other. The mood is electric, yet unhurried. Something is about to begin. Each competitor knows how to read the river's mood. Some dive to avoid blows, others use the boat's own motion to strike back. It's athleticism, yes, but also dance. And woven through it all is ritual. Some of the boys have painted symbols on their chests: hawks for speed, lotus blossoms for grace, crocodiles for cunning. You realize now this is not merely sport, it is storytelling by other means. Their boats line up beneath a row of flickering torches lit on poles rising from the riverbed. The flames dance on the water, casting strange shapes. Lions with wings, serpents coiled in air, sacred birds frozen mid-flight. The crowd leans forward. You can feel the hush in your bones. The boats launch fast and sure. The first clash is quick. A pole snaps in two, a man overboard. But the next is slower, more deliberate. One man lunges, misses, staggers. His opponent steps lightly to the bow and waits. The river rocks them like a cradle, and for a moment, all time seems to hold its breath. A reenactment, perhaps, of old myths. The struggle of Horus and Set, the taming of the chaos waters, the eternal balance between control and surrender. The winner raises his pole high, not in triumph, but in thanks to the river, to the night, to the game. Around you, the crowd erupts not with shouts, but with applause like rainfall, gentle, endless. You realize now that no one truly wins or loses here. The joy is in the balance, in the leap, in the fall, and in the rising again. You notice drums first low, steady, like heartbeats made of wood. Then the flutes high and lilting. She murmurs blessings as she passes them into eager hands. For luck, she says, and for river favor. The boats have changed shape, wider now, flatter, decorated with streamers and painted panels. One holds a band of masked pranksters who leap from side to side, pretending to fall, then springing back up to laughter and applause. Another features two boys, pretending to duel over a mythical treasure, shouting exaggerated insults, drawing foam weapons. The line between theater and sport blurs. Everyone plays a part, and you, though no one has cast you, feel yourself drawn into the rhythm. The Nile, wide and ancient, seems to pulse with memory. Perhaps every splash, every laugh, every tilt of a boat echoes some forgotten story still drifting beneath the water's surface. A new game unfolds, the paddle dance. On each deck, a performer balances at the center, using a single paddle not to steer but to spin the boat in slow, graceful circles. The crowd quiets as one girl, no more than 16, kneels at the prow, body arched, paddle slicing the surface like silk. The river responds, ripple, shimmer, echo. Her boat spins once, twice, and then tilts just enough to thrill the onlookers before righting itself again. The boat becomes an extension of her body, and the river a stage that breathes. A boy beside you presses one to his nose and grins. There's food too, of course. Skewers of grilled fish, bowls of lentils, sweet cakes made with honey and date. The scent of cumin and coriander lingers in the air, joining the music, the splash, the cheer. All around you, life is suspended in celebration. Nothing to harvest, nothing to build, nothing to mourn. Just this. Movement on water, joy on wind, and finally, the deep call of horns carved from ivory and shell. A procession of boats begins to line up midstream. They are narrow and long, made for speed and mischief. On each one, a team of young men balances on deck, holding long poles, bare-chested and grinning. You stand near the riverbank, close enough to feel the wet breath of evening rising from the water. You've heard whispers of it before, how the villagers turn the floodwaters into a stage, how boys become warriors, dancers, comedians, all at once. The goal is simple: knock your opponent off the boat and into the Nile. But the elegance of the sport lies not in its outcome, but in its unpredictability. The river itself plays along, churns and swells, dragging debris from upstream, hiding eddies and reeds beneath its surface. One wrong shift of weight and the game is over. A dozen boats begin to drift forward, guided by current and skill. The crowd roars as two teams meet. There's a clash of poles, a splash, and then peals of laughter as one boy surfaces, drenched but triumphant. Papyrus plants rustle gently at your feet, and the scent of silt and sweet rot rises with the breeze. It is the season of the inundation. Fields have disappeared beneath the flood, swallowed whole by the river's ancient rhythm. And yet, far from stillness, this is a time of celebration. Oohs glide across the shimmering surface, not for fishing, not for labor, but for play. Their sails bloom like painted petals, bright against the deepening sky. You walk closer. A crowd has gathered at the bank, sandals kicking up dust, linen robes glowing faintly in the amber light. This is the river joust. You watch the jousts unfold like theater. There's rhythm in the chaos, bodies twist. You are that boy now barefoot on pale stone, toes gripping smooth sandstone slabs as you cross the courtyard of a lesser temple near Heliopolis. The priests are inside, murmuring to the gods behind curtains of incense. The pieces sometimes clash in the middle, fighting for control of the sacred squares. But today, the courtyard is yours alone. You move the jackal carefully, counting aloud under your breath. Some versions of the game require a final riddle, a spoken word, a token offering. You place the jackal back in your basket and cover the board with your shawl. The street beyond is already full of life vendors calling out, donkeys braying, market stalls opening like petals. But the memory of the painted serpent clings to your skin like perfume. You carry it with you, not as a trophy, but as a path you've walked. And perhaps in your next dream, you will walk it again, this time with Ra beside you, Mahone curled beneath, guarding your steps in the dark. The priests do not speak to you, but they see you. One nods slightly in your direction, a flicker of recognition. You are part of the temple, part of the rite, even if you never stepped inside. For you have played Mayhan, you have walked the serpent's back. You roll again. 1. Now only one square remains. You hold your breath. This is the moment of tension, the quiet math of fate. And perhaps, in a sense, he does. The game was always meant to mirror his nightly voyage. As he descends into darkness, so must you symbolically moving through the coils of Mayhan. Each step a trial, each move a measure of balance. Only a gardener passes, sweeping petals from beneath the statue of Hathor. The square is darker, larger, decorated with a faded lotus motif. It's said that if a player lingers here too long, their path will be cursed that. One must pass through quickly or be trapped by hesitation. You rest your hand on the cool stone and close your eyes. For a moment, the world is silent, but you are unafraid. You are no longer in the courtyard, but in the imagined underworld. A cavern of stars, a path lit by flickering braziers, the hiss of distant snakes echoing across unseen water. You take a breath, then you move on. You feel the rhythm echo through the courtyard and realize how closely it matches your game. He nods at you, his eyes kind. He does not interrupt. He knows what you are doing. The priests are finishing their morning rites. Each turn, each move, has its own tempo. Only 5 squares remain between you and the serpent's mouth. Remember something your grandfather once said during a festival? Even the gods love rhythm. That's why they invented time. You smile at the thought, then focus again. They are bridges between worlds, teaching tools, metaphors wrapped in wood and stone. Even pharaohs have played Mayan-sculpted boards have been found in royal tombs, buried alongside ceremonial garments and jars of honeyed beer. You remember your teacher's voice, explaining the rules and their meanings. Don't rush, he warned. Even gods must walk the long way. The serpent, you were told, is both protector and puzzle. It circles to keep out chaos, but also to test those who dare approach the heart. But here in the outer court, where the pigeons coo beneath statues of forgotten deities, a circle has been drawn, not in chalk or pigment, but in tiny, precise tiles, each one placed by hand. It forms the shape of a coiled serpentite's mouth open, its tail vanishing behind itself. This is a game, a sacred one, and it is yours to play. You kneel before it, placing your basket to one side. You choose the jackal, today, clever, swift, a guide between worlds. Before you begin, you trace the outer edge of the serpent's back, following the inlaid squares that spiral toward its open jaws. This is Mahon, the coiled one, named for the serpent god who wrapped himself around the sun barge of Ra as it sailed through the underworld each night, guarding it from demons and darkness. To play Mayan is not just to pass time, is to walk, symbolically, that same perilous path. Not because the game requires it, but because the serpent's middle is sacred. The first throw of the casting sticks is light, soft against the stone. Your game today is solitary, but you've seen it played with 6 others, even 7 each guiding their piece along. The curve of the serpent's back, racing, leaping, blocking. The serpent's mouth is both entry and exit, victory and rebirth. You roll again. This time the sticks fall hard. 6. A long leap forward. Halfway through, you pause to rest. Behind you, the temple's sacred music begins harps, sistrums, the soft tap of framed drums. But in Mahan, the end is never simple. The sun is higher now, and the stone beneath you has begun to warm. You walk away slowly, the sound of the sistrum fading behind you. At dawn, the edges of the marsh come alive. You walk slowly through the tall papyrus, the stalks rising high above your shoulders, their feathered heads brushing the sky. A circle of people has formed, 3 elders sitting cross-legged on mats of woven reed, and 5 children perched on smooth stones, fidgeting, whispering, trying not to laugh before the game begins. Others are winding and strange, full of metaphor and ancient references. Some say the gods themselves played riddles in the first days when creation was still soft, and words had power over water and fire. I can be eaten, I can be worn. I am feared by some, but bring joy to others. Some will return to their homes, their chores, their markets. But before they go, the oldest woman raises one hand. The final riddle of the day. I am shaped by hands, but hold no form. I vanish when needed and linger when not. I am the twin of silence and the cousin of smoke. What am I? The group is quiet. Even the wind seems to pause. No one answers. No one needs to. Unriddles, after all, are meant not to be solved but carried. And as you rise and walk back through the reeds, the riddle walks with you. I die in fire and am born in time. What am I? The girl thinks. Murmurs something, then shakes her head. The elder waits, then taps her own ear. Perfume, she says. The children erupt with surprise, a few groaning, others laughing. One boy sniffs dramatically at his sleeve, then sticks out his tongue. The game ripples forward, question to answer, answer to thought. And behind every riddle lies a secret, a way of seeing the world, of turning it on its side, just enough to glimpse its hidden shape. In Thebes, it's whispered that priests once challenged each other in riddled verse to win positions of power. I sleep in jars, I wake with teeth, I can cure or kill. You find me in kitchens, in tombs. There's a pause. Then an elder leans forward, tapping your knee with the palm nut. It's garlic, she says. and well put. You smile. Feels good. His quiet approval. Not prideful, just warm. Here in the reeds, language is not a weapon. It is a bridge, a braid, a dance between generations. The children learn patience. The elders remember youth. And all of it folds into the wind, joining the hush of the marsh, the ripple of birds in flight. Elsewhere, children were trained to riddle as part of scribal school and exercise in double meaning, memory, and clever speech. Even in court, nobles wrap their insults in riddles, too elegant to be punished outright. A witty man, it was said, could escape the lash with a single turn of phrase. I drink sunlight but never eat. I can break without bleeding, one child offers. My face is not mine, but I show yours. Another suggests I live in many mouths, but have no legs. I've been in the desert and in the flood, but I never leave home. The elders nod or frown or laugh, and the answers arrive like wind through cloth. A mirror, a song, a scarab, a name. You realize these are not just games of wit. They are stories reduced to puzzles, bits of the world compressed into jewels of language. One of the elders, a woman with a voice like honey scraped across rough wood, leans forward. She holds a polished palm nut in one hand, tapping it lightly against her knee. Then she speaks, not loudly, not grandly, but with the soft command of someone who knows every ear is tuned to her breath. I am the brother of the bird, but fear the sky. I'm the child of the earth, but float on water. What am I? The air is thick with the scent of damp green and silt, soft as breath, still heavy with the dew of night. Your feet press into spongy earth, and the hush of the reeds feels sacred as if the wind itself has stopped to listen. Somewhere nearby, water birds splash and call. The first pale threads of sunlight begin to lace across the surface of the flooded shallows. But your destination is not the birds or the fish, it's a small, shaded clearing tucked between thickets of papyrus, where children and elders gather not for labor, but for laughter, not for work, but for words. You crouch as you approach, careful not to startle the scene. There is silence. The children squint, exchange looks, furrow their brows. One bites their lip, another grins, trying not to guess too soon. Something that doesn't belong where it ought to, and yet survives. You sit quietly on the edge of the gathering, letting the riddle roll through your thoughts. You picture it, bird and sky, earth and water. A trick, a turn of meaning. Then a boy claps his hands, laughing. A reed, he cries. The elder smiles slow and wide. She passes him the palm nut. It is his turn now. The game moves like that triddle to riddle. Mind to mind, not with competition, but with rhythm, with a kind of familial music. Each riddle is different. Some are short and sharp, like snapped twigs. The tradition is older than anyone here can remember. At the edge of the city, where the mud brick walls shimmer in the heat and the streets widen into dusty courtyards, something peculiar is taking place. You walk slowly toward it, drawn not by music or banners, but by a peculiar stillness like the hush before a drum beat. The wind smells faintly of wine and burning papyrus, sweet and acrid. She is not a goddess, nor a dancer, but the town baker, known more for her temper than her grace. Others say it honored servants, whose quiet hands built kingdoms. In Memphis, it was once tied to the moon's cycle, a moment when mathocosmic order was paused so it could breathe. Even the gods, it was said, took a day off from justice. Torches are lit around the square, and everything glows gold and orange. A group of singers begins to chant, their voices soft and slow. Not silly, not wild, something more ancient. They sing of the goddess who turns the wheel, who sees all roles and wears each face. Like the world has turned over and landed a little more gently than before. The festival will come again next year, next season, next lifetime. And when it does, everything will be backward just long enough to make sense again. They sing of the Nile reversing, of the stars walking backward, of time folding like cloth. Lie back on the stone, full of bread and story, and stare up at the sky. The stars don't seem to move but tonight. Perhaps they are watching from different places. You wonder if Matt herself walks through the crowd in secret, wrapped in rags, smiling quietly at her own undoing. A great table is laid out with food, some real, some absurd. Children fall asleep beside the elders they judged. The order of the world begins to return, not with a crash, but with a sigh. You rise, your head light, your feet dusty, Someone offers you a cup of water and thanks you for your service, though they do not know your name. You bow deeply. It feels right. Loaves shaped like fish, dates tied into knots, a melon carved into the face of a pharaoh. Everyone eats. Everyone laughs. You sit beside a woman with a painted mustache and listen to her explain, solemnly, that tomorrow she returns to silence. That she will scrub floors and speak only when spoken to. But today, just today, she is free to laugh too loudly to pretend to be the sun. You nod. You understand. There's something sacred in that. Inverting the world allowed it to be renewed. By seeing its absurdity, one could remember its purpose. You sip sweet beer from a chipped cup and try not to smile as two oxen are marched through the square wearing garlands and gold nose rings, while their owner dances behind them, mooing solemnly with each step. Yet today, she tilts her head regally and feeds you dates, as if you were her honored guest, to her pet. Children sit in judgment while elders kneel before them, pleading their silly cases. One complains that his neighbor's cat sings too loudly at night. Another demands more water in his soup. The children stroke their chins, argue in exaggerated whispers, then deliver verdicts with great seriousness. Punishments are playful. 3 turns around the well. A poem shouted to the sky, a dance performed with a beetle on the forehead. No one escapes. Everyone participates. You realize watching this scene unfold that this chaos isn't lawless, it's its own kind of order. A ritualized reversal that allows the real world to bend, to flex, to breathe. A man dressed as a pharaoh parades past, his beard made of straw, his sandals mismatched. You tie it on. Behind it, your face vanishes, and with it, a little of yourself. It's part of the magic. No one knows who anyone is. Roles blur. The priest might be a potter. The juggler could be the high judge. Freed from names and titles, people move like wind. You join a slow procession where dancers pretend to be statues, and statues pretend to dance. A funeral is held for a cucumber, mourned by wailing mourners in borrowed wigs. You see a donkey being led into a tavern and offered a cup of milk as if it were a prince. It drinks with surprising dignity. He bellows declarations in a high-pitched voice, decreeing that donkeys shall be priests and all fish must be given holidays. No one corrects him. They cheer instead. You notice something strange. A real scribe stands behind him, recording the nonsense proclamations on a sheet of papyrus. Not as a joke, but as record. Even false kings must leave behind truths. Around you, people are gathering, but not as they usually appear. A man in royal linen sweeps dung from the path, his head bowed, his hands black with dust. A young servant girl lounges on a carved stool, waving a painted fan while a nobleman kneels to refill her cup. A priest dances in the street, barefoot and laughing, his sacred collar flapping askew. This is the festival of the inversion, a celebration older than temples, older than calendars, marked by a single strange rule. For one day, everything is... The moon has risen slowly, silently, over the temple district of Thebes. It hangs like a pearl suspended on invisible thread, casting its cool light across the flat rooftops and inner courtyards of the city. You sit near the edge of a stone wall, your shoulder resting against warm plaster that still holds the memory of daytime sun. But this is not celebration. This is something older. Her arms arc outward slowly, drawing a shape you do not know but feel you've seen in dreams. She is reaching, sweeping, gathering something invisible. Her husband, her god, broken and scattered across the land. She moves in arcs and spirals, wrists folding over one another like linen wrappings. The music shifts again. A flute joins. The dancer circles the perimeter now, tracing the edge of the sacred space. Her body settles, breath even, limbs folding in a posture of stillness. The stories of gods and rivers and grief and return now rest not in your thoughts, but somewhere behind them, as if etched softly into your ribs. You understand now why such dances are not mere entertainment. They are memory-made motion, prayer in the shape of a girl. Look up. The stars are still, the moon unblinking. But you can't help but wonder if somewhere in the realm beyond this, Isis herself watched the story unfold and wept all over again. Not from sorrow, but from recognition. And somewhere Osiris heard. The harp fades, The drum gives one last low echo, and then silence. It is not the silence of nothing. It is the silence of completion. A hush that settles not only in the air, but inside the watchers. You realize you've been holding your breath. You exhale, slow and deep. One woman steps forward, placing a lotus blossom at the dancer's feet. Another offers a soft prayer in a tongue no longer spoken aloud. The dancer rises, bows not to the crowd, but to the moon, and disappears once more into shadow. Her face is serene, not smiling, not blank, but utterly present. Her eyes find yours for the briefest instant, and in that moment, you feel as if she sees not only you, but everything you've forgotten. Her shadow stretches long behind her, 2 parts dancer, 1 part goddess. Her anklets chime again, and the sound is like glass striking water. She kneels, touches the earth, then rises again with the slow ache of morning. The drumbeat deepens. It's as if time folds inward here. Around you, others have gathered. A priest sits beneath a sycamore, with his head bowed, hands folded over his knees. A mother holds her child in her lap, both breathing in the rhythm. Even the insects have gone still. Only the dancer moves. Only the dancer speaks. Her bare feet glide across the chalk-lined floor without lifting, leaving faint prints in the dust. Her feet describe the river's winding course. Her fingers open like water lilies. Her shoulders roll like waves in flood. Her breath is audible now, carefully matched to the musician's. The rhythm is subtle, but unbroken. You have the sense that if she stumbled, the very stars would pause to correct themselves. The myth she dances is not performance, is invocation. Each motion feeds something unseen. You remember hearing that dancers were taught like scribes, each gesture memorized, each story marked not in ink but in bone and breath. The gods, it was said, listened better to movement than to prayer. A well-told dance was more powerful than 100 hymns. Each motion unfolds like a word spoken in another tongue, deliberate, reverent, sure. The harp is joined by a second, then a third, plucking out a pattern like water slipping through reeds. A frame drum enters beneath, slow and pulsing, like a heartbeat barely stirring. Her hips sway in a steady rhythm, each gesture echoing something you can't name, something that feels like memory. Beneath your bare feet, the ground is swept clean, strewn with hibiscus petals and faint lines of crushed chalk, marking where ritual is soon to unfold. The air is heady with incensal wood, frankincense. Dried blue lotus sand, the faint trace of roasted figs drifting in from a nearby garden. Lanterns flicker, each flame caught in its own breathless dance, their light golden and soft beside the moon's silver wash. You feel the hush settle deeper now. The drums are not playing yet, but the silence has already become a rhythm. From the far side of the courtyard, a figure steps into view, and all motion stops. The dancer is young, though her bearing is ancient. Her limbs are long and bare, wrists wrapped in golden cuffs, each adorned with tiny chimes that sing with the subtlest movement. Her linen is sheer, dyed the color of river silt, clinging close as if shaped by wind. Her eyes are painted heavily. Not for beauty, but for ritual, the lined curves sweeping outward in imitation of the eye of Horus, guardian of order. She takes no bow, gives no greeting. Instead, she stands utterly still, as if listening to the very foundation of the temple. Then, a single harp string sounds, and she begins to move. You have seen dancers before at marketplaces, at weddings, in alleyways thick with laughter and clapping hands. She becomes Isis now. You understand this not because anyone has said so, but because her body tells you. She shifts again, becoming the Nile itself, fertile, eternal. The air around you thickens with scent. Someone adds fresh myrrh to the brazier. Its smoke curls upward, meeting the moonlight in strange, twisting threads. She returns to the center. The music slows. Her final movements are small palms pressing together, then opening as if to release what she carried. The scent of warm linen and cooking oil lingers in the hallway as you step barefoot across the worn stone threshold. Your soles touch smooth floor swept clean by countless hands. Inside, the courtyard is dim, lit by small clay lamps tucked into alcoves, their flames painting the walls in soft gold. The air is thick with dusk and memory. You hear the murmur of a voice, steady, rhythmic. like someone stirring a story into the night. He knocks over a bowl and everyone gasps, then giggles. In homes like this, tales are not told. They are worn, inhabited, passed down like recipes or jewelry. The masks were made by the grandmother's mother and hers before her. Each carries a chip, a crack, a thumb-smooth cheek where a god once lived for an evening. In temple schools, scribes may learn myths by ink, but here, myth walks. It sits cross-legged by the fire. It adjusts its shawl and clears its throat before delivering the next scene. You feel the warmth, not just from the flames, but from the quiet understanding that nothing needs to be perfect to be sacred. That divinity sometimes is a wrinkled hand reaching into a basket of painted faces. Hathor is slow and graceful, offering music with imaginary sistrums, swaying like palm trees in a breeze that only she can feel. When Set arrives mask scratched, red pigment chipped, he speaks in riddles and moves like dust caught in stormlight. The grandmother never stumbles. Body contains every god, every chaos, every grace. You feel the room lean in and exhale with each new shape she takes. The house itself seems to shift in rhythm, walls breathing, shadows nodding, silence learning its lines. You pass beneath an arch and find the family gathered on mats around a low fire. In the center, seated tall, on a cushion worn thin by years of ritual, is the grandmother. Her back is straight, her hands folded. The grandmother holds it for a long moment before placing it gently over her own. Her voice is her own again, but softer. She speaks now as herself, not a goddess, not a crocodile, not a cat. She tells a story of her first night dancing for her siblings, wrapped in her mother's shawl, wearing a mask too large for her head. She speaks of forgetting the words, of laughing, of starting again. The children listen as if this is the most important tale of all. You sit back, arms resting loosely in your lap, and feel something settle behind your ribs. The story ends not with applause, but with silence full of warmth. A night of gods, told not in stone, but in gesture and breath. And as you step away from the house, the scent of dust, sweat, and story still clings to you. More behind you, a mask returns to its basket and waits for the next voice to wear it. And beside her, a basket of scarves, beads, and painted masks waits quietly, as if it remembers its own lines. No one speaks as she selects the first mask. It is long-nosed, whitewashed, with almond eyes outlined in kohl. She lifts it to her face and changes not just her voice, but her shoulders, her breath. It does not need to be. The magic is not in precision, but presence. With each change of mask, the fire grows a little dimmer, as if drawing its light inward to listen more closely. Bastet tells of a time when laughter kept illness away. She acts it out, tail flicking, shoulders rolling, paws swatting invisible enemies. The children squeal softly, biting their sleeves to stay quiet. You smile. You remember hearing of Ak, the shimmering spirit of a person who lives on through story. In this moment, it feels as if the grandmother wears not a mask, but a memory that speaks through her. You do not see the grandmother anymore. You see the ibis-headed god Thoth, leaning forward in the firelight, speaking of the day he invented words to name stars. The children lean in. One clutches a reed doll to her chest. Another traces shapes on his knee, following along in silent ritual. The mask tilts. The voice deepens. The story flows. Of how the gods once argued over which day should exist outside the calendar, and how trickery birthed time itself. It is not a lecture. It is not even quite a tale. It is something between breath and shadow alive. Only here, only now. The next mask is of Bastet, cat-eyed and smiling. A scarf becomes a robe. Bracelet becomes a collar. The transformation is not perfect. There are stories within stories here. Each mask draws out a different mood. Sobek is loud, stomping, hissing with his crocodile teeth. This kind of storytelling is not rare, but it is special. The final mask is not of a god. The day has just begun to dim when you arrive at the edge of the sacred canal. It is not yet evening, but the sunlight softens, brushed into gold as it touches the water. You stand near a thicket of papyrus, the stalks rustling gently at your side, watching as people gather slowly along the sloped banks. There's a hush, here not silent, but expectant, like the quiet before a sacred word is spoken. Some scholars whisper they originated in Memphis, or Abydos, though no scroll names the first. What is known is that during festivals like Opet, when the sacred barks of gods were carried from Karnak to Luxor, smaller boats like this floating theaters would appear beside them. They didn't compete with the gods' grandeur. They accompanied it. The canal holds no ripple, as if protecting the memory just shared. You step back from the edge, the warmth of the performance still resting along your skin. And in that moment, you understand something simple and profound. That some stories are not meant to be owned. They are meant to pass through, escaried in shadows and wood, in gestures and string, in the careful stillness of water. You do not need to remember the lines. The boat remembers. The puppets remember. The watchers remember. And tomorrow, or next season, or next lifetime, when the canal quiets again and the lanterns return, the theater will float once more, softly, surely, light as myth, heavy as meaning. While priests performed rituals behind tall walls, puppeteers told the same stories in light and motion, for children and families and the curious. And sometimes perhaps for the gods themselves, watching unseen from the reeds. The air is rich with festival smells. Honeyed bread, oiled wood, the faint perfume of dried marjoram and date wine. A crocodile god appears briefly, sliding across the stage, its carved tail flicking side to side in perfect mimicry. The puppets bow, not in triumph, but in acknowledgement. The screen is lowered, the music trails off like smoke. No applause, no calls, just breath. The boat turns quietly, drifting back toward the bend of the canal where lanterns wait. The water hushes. The spectators do not speak immediately. Some bow their heads. One woman weeps gently, and her son touches her hand. A small child clasps a reed toy in both fists, holding it close to her chest. You feel no urge to speak either. The silence that follows is part of the story, the final act that must be respected. The boat becomes smaller as it retreats, until it disappears behind the reeds, leaving only its reflection. A puppeteer gently sways the boat in rhythm with the flute, and the canal itself becomes the underworld river. You almost forget you are in Thebes. You forget your name. You are only a watcher, carried across water by memory. You notice one of the puppeteers, briefly a flash of hand, a whisper of ankle bangled on. You sense their reverence. They do not merely perform, they guard the story. The festival of Opet is in full rhythm across the city, but this corner of the canal holds something quieter, older. In the distance, a flat-bottomed boat begins to approach, painted in faded teal and adorned with ribbons and bells. Its small canopy sways as it nears, and behind its painted screen, shadows already begin to move. You step closer to the water's edge, careful not to disturb the others already seated. Children rest on their parents' laps, and older men sit cross-legged, faces lit by anticipation and lantern glow. The puppeteers hidden behind the screen and beneath the canopy move with precision born not only of practice but devotion. Every movement echoes something older than the wood it's carved from. Horus bows. Isis enters, her puppet wrapped in gauze, her hands forever reaching. Then Set appears, red and sharp and angular, his limbs exaggerated, almost grotesque. The puppets clash, argue, circle one another in graceful conflict. One leaps into the air, another crumples, defeated. And always the music guides them, rhythm shifting with mood, flutes fluttering like wings, drums echoing like distant thunder. The boat itself rocks gently with the motion, and you begin to feel that you are not watching the story, but floating within it. The boat glides slowly, steered by two men using narrow oars, their movements fluid and ritualized. Behind the linen screen at the center of the vessel, the puppet theater begins. At first, only shapes soft silhouettes of figures stretching, bowing, leaping. Then the flute begins. A gentle, trembling note floats out across the water, soon joined by the harp's slow, deliberate chords. The first puppet appears. Horus carved from sycamore, painted in shimmering blues and golds, falconhead perfectly balanced atop jointed shoulders. He raises a staff, and the crowd leans forward. The story has begun. No words are spoken, and yet everything is told. The tradition is older than most remember. Puppet plays were not merely for entertainment, they were acts of devotion, Reenactments of divine struggle performed to ensure the continuation of balance. You watch the details unfold. A small ibis puppet carries a scroll made from real bark, tied with dyed linen. The play ends not with a climax, but a return. Stars emerge without fanfare. A breeze moves through the papyrus. The sand holds its warmth into the evening as you walk along the edge of a small plaza near the workers' quarter. The sun has gone, but the stones still glow faintly with the heat of the day, radiating a slow hush across the square. It lands on its edge, tilts, then rests. 3. Another man makes a mark in the clay dust with a reed stick. One of the players glances upward, then back at the board. A cat walks by, tail curled like a question. You close your eyes for a moment, listening not for sounds, but for cadence. The steady clack of bone on clay, the soft exhale of breath, the rustle of linen as someone shifts. These are not just men playing. They are participants in a pattern older than the city. It does not matter who wins. Perhaps they are not even keeping score. Perhaps the point is to remain in rhythm long enough to forget the questions. The game slows. One player rests his hand on the board, then withdraws. Another gathers the dice in both palms and cups them as if holding water. You feel something ease inside your chest, as if luck is not something to win, but something to witness. Somewhere in the distance you hear a flute knot music. Just practice. The game continues. A man rolls too far. The die bounces, lands outside the board. No one scolds him. Picks it up, bows slightly, and tries again. It's a reminder. Even in a game of chance, there is space for gentleness. You think of how much in life turns on things unseen angles. Weight, wind, a slight slip, and the pattern changes. But here, around this board, that change is welcomed. Each throw is honored, whether it leads to victory or simply another round. They do not cheer. They do not frown. Each move is accepted as it is, like the tilt of the sun or the change of season. That Ra and Thoth tossed stars into place, and that time itself came into being from the roll of divine bones. That may be story or metaphor, but tonight it feels close. One of the players opens a small cloth pouch and pours out 3 more dice. Each one marked differently, dots, slashes, tiny animal carvings. Experimental pieces, perhaps? Or from a different region. The group rearranges the board slightly, clears a space in the dust, and begins a second game alongside the first. Not replacement, but expansion. You smile. Even the rules are flexible here. The only constant is care. One of them murmurs a short phrase, not loud enough to be heard clearly, but the others nod. The dice roll again. One of them holds a bead of blue faience between thumb and finger it. As unclear if it is a wager, a charm, or simply something to hold. You realize you don't know the rules, but it doesn't matter. The feeling is familiar, the movement, the weight, the watching of something small that carries something large. Palm trees rise like soft pillars along the outer walls, and in their shadows sit 5 men cross-legged on woven mats. Scholars have pieced together fragments boards found in tombs, notes left in margins, half-explained glyphs beside diagrams. But to those who play, it is less about exactness than rhythm. Each roll a verse, each move a meditation. You remember hearing once that a seb was played in marketplaces, on the decks of barges, and in military camps during lulls between battles? Sometimes played for goods, sometimes for favors, but sometimes, like now, it was played for nothing, or rather for something unseen. Reflection, time, quiet companionship. You watch as the game continues. The dice are worn smooth. The players speak not in words, but in the slow ritual of turns. Between them lies a low board, nothing ornate. Just a square slab of clay marked with lines and circles, smoothed by countless fingers. On it sit tiny dice for-sided, carved from animal bone, painted at the corners with red and blue. You feel yourself drawn in, not because of the stakes, but because of the silence. This is not a noisy game, and it is a quiet one, and it has already begun. You sit nearby, not too close, and watch as one man leans forward, picks up a die, and rolls it across the board with the care of someone setting down a prayer. This game is called Aseb, or something close to it. No one knows the rules completely anymore. A breeze moves through the square, stirring the edge of a basket filled with pomegranates. They say the gods once played dice in the sky. The square darkens. Lamps are lit along the walls. The cat curls into sleep. Still, the game continues. The scent of sweet beer and roasted barley drifts upward as you descend the narrow steps carved into the hillside. The air is dry but not heavy. Clay lanterns glow along the stone passage, their light soft and flickering. The duck beneath a low lintel, then emerge into a small chamber dug into the rock, filled with warmth voices and the smell of freshly baked bread. A woman with gold-dyed fingernails hands you a fig wrapped in palm leaf. The man and his daughter feeding geese, the man throwing a stick at a water jar while two friends laugh behind him. The man asleep under a palm tree, a cat curled beside his feet. The figure of the deceased remains where it sat, watching, smiling, held in stillness while life swirled around it once more. You rise slowly, body relaxed from warmth, limbs quiet from stillness. You step back out into the night, the stone steps cool beneath your feet now. Behind you, the tomb door is gently pulled, shut, not sealed. Not locked, but closed like a friend's home after a visit. In your chest, you carry something hard to name, not sadness, not comfort, something in between. As if you've glimpsed a way to remember that does not demand silence or stone, but noise, movement, bread, jokes. As if somewhere beyond time the dead man laughed again tonight. That was enough. These are not imagined images of ideal afterlife. They are memories made permanent. You wonder if he asked for this. While still alive, he chose joy as his monument. Or if those he left behind decided laughter was a more faithful tribute than gold. One carving catches your eye, a group of figures eating from a single pot. One of them turned to face the viewer, winking. The artist has scratched a short line beneath it in faded ink. You lean forward to read it. Even the gods borrow salt from their neighbors. You accept it with a nod. Across from you, a boy no older than 7 wears a reed crown not performed. One woman hums at first, quietly while folding cloth. Then a second voice joins, then a third. Before long, the room is filled with soft harmony, low, circular, without end. The words are about work and water, about heat and harvest, but every few lines return to the dead man's name, as if he is still among them, just out of reach. The music is not mournful. It's round and real, full of breath and dust. You close your eyes and listen. The sound folds into the chamber like incense. You wonder if the dead can hear such songs. Or perhaps it is not about them hearing at all. Perhaps it is the living who need to remember the sound of their own laughter beside someone they've lost. A ritual not of memory, but of continuation. Performs a skit, pretending to be the dead man himself, scolding his lazy workers and laughing at his own jokes. The audience chuckles. Someone calls out, mimicking the man's wife. The boy plays along, wagging his finger and swaying his hips. There's no disrespect in it. It's only memory shaped by joy. You realize you've seen funeral carvings in temples, but none like this. None where the departed are remembered with teasing, song, or wine-stained lips. Perhaps because this isn't for show, it's not for gods. It's for people who knew the shape of the deceased shadow in afternoon light, who still hear his footsteps in their own habits. This is not a place of sorrow. It is a gathering bright, earthy, and filled with the kind of laughter that slips out between bites of food. You blink and take in the scene. Women seated on folded blankets, their hands busy passing dates and fruit. An elder man adjusting the rim of a water jar. Group of children clapping along to a rhythm made by 2 men slapping their knees. This is a tomb, but it does not feel like one. At the center of the room lies a low altar, simple, clay-colored, with a carved offering tray inset into the stone. On it rest small cups of milk, onions braided with garlic, a handful of lentils arranged in a circle, and a clay bowl filled with wine. A painted wooden figure of the deceased sits behind the tray, wearing a bright linen headdress and a smile that's more lifelike than reverent. You recognize the style? This was someone not noble, but known. A scribe, perhaps, or a grain counter. Someone loved by many, if not named in monuments. The room is his tomb, and his guests are not mourners, they are companions. Tonight is his night of the voice, the yearly rite in which the dead are spoken to, sung to, fed again, not to wake them, not to grieve, but to remind them they are still part of the world. You sit near the wall, arms folded over your knees. You begin to notice the details carved into the tomb walls, not grand scenes of judgment or divine processions, but simple, playful vignettes. Later in the evening, a song begins. It's not formal. When the gathering ends, no one cries. The stones beneath your feet are cool, even though the air still carries the weight of the day's heat. You step through a narrow passageway lined with carved lotus columns, your hand trailing gently along their fluted edges. The light here is dim, not from shadow, but by design. This is not a room for the sun. This is a chamber for stars. The constellations begin to feel less like decoration and more like presence. If the living study the stars to measure what comes, then the dead lie beneath them to remember what was. The apprentices follow, each still tracing symbols in the air, as if not yet done. You are alone now, and yet you do not feel alone. You rise, walking once more around the chamber, your fingers brushing the grooves of symbols older than any temple floor. They do not ask to be translated. They simply exist, as stars do not to be conquered, but to be seen. You step out into the corridor again, back into the warmth of ordinary night. But something lingers behind your ribs of stillness, a turning, as if you now carry a tiny sky within you. And perhaps that is the gift of the room, not knowledge, but alignment. Time loops like a river, never the same, but always returning. You think of the old myths, of Nut, goddess of the sky, arching over the world with stars upon her skin, of Ra sailing through her body each night, swallowed in the west, born again in the east. And you wonder, did the stars above you move, or did your thinking shift around them? You blink, and for a moment the room feels vast beyond logic, like the roof is peeled away to reveal the actual night. They're not there to impress, they are there to remember. Each figure painted in movement, a leg extended, a bow drawn, a sail catching wind. Between the stars, you begin to see symbols you do not recognize. Not animals or gods, but shapes looped, squared, repeated like the rhythms of breath. Perhaps they are not names, but instructions. The old priest finally moves, lifting a thin rod to the ceiling. He taps once, twice, 3 times against a line of stars. The apprentice beside him whispers something and writes. You do not ask what it means. Somehow the gesture feels more important than the answer. At the end of the passage, a doorway opens into a vast hall, wider than expected, with a ceiling that curves above like the bowl of the sky itself. You pause just inside, breath held. Above you stretches night painted, precise, luminous. A field of deep blue plaster scattered with constellations in gold. Orion. Sothis. The ever-sailing boat of millions. This is the temple's celestial room, and it feels like you've stepped inside memory. You walk further in, the soles of your sandals brushing over smooth stone marked with faint diagrams. These were once drawn in red, then carved more deeply, then darkened with soot maps, not of land but of time. Here the temple's star readers chart the paths of the heavens knot, for prediction, not for magic, but for alignment. When the stars are understood, the festivals can begin, the fields can flood, the dead can journey. Everything begins with balance. You've heard that in this temple. They believe cosmic harmony is not a static thing, but something that must be measured constantly. Just as the farmer tests soil or the baker balances dough, the priests test the sky to ensure that the gods still agree with time, to ensure the ceiling still matches the world it mirrors. Along one wall, a low platform holds measuring rods, scratched tablets, and bowls of dark ink. They have not been moved in days, yet nothing here gathers dust. You hear a quiet sound scratch of stylus on limestone. In the far corner, an old priest sits cross-legged, with his back against the wall, eyes turned upward. He is not alone. 2 apprentices sit beside him, one copying a pattern into a scroll, the other tracing invisible lines into the air with a slender reed. The old man does not speak. He only watches the painted sky, as if waiting for something to move. This chamber is not a place of worship in the usual sense. No incense burns, no offerings sit at altars, but it is sacred nonetheless. You sit near the center of the room, looking upward. It is said that the ceilings of some tombs mimic this room, painted in the same deep indigo, dotted with stars, meant to carry the dead gently into the next world. Eventually, the old priest stands. He gathers the tablets into a bundle, wraps the rod in linen, and nods once to the ceiling before leaving in silence. The The smell of smoke and damp straw curls through the early morning air as you step onto the compacted earth of the potter's yard. Sun has yet to rise, but the world is already faintly aglow lit by the embers of last night's fire. There is no rushing here, only patience. A boy moves past, barefoot, carrying a wooden tray of bowls with glistening slips still drying on their rims. Another stirs a vat of clay with a paddle taller than himself, the mixture thick and quiet. In some temples, old vessels are buried with priest's knot, because they hold relics, but because they once served. The sacred in this case is not in perfection, but in endurance. A pot that cracked but still held water. A bowl chipped at the rim but passed from mother to daughter for years. You look around the yard again. Some of the vessels drying on the shelves have markings scratched underneath teeny spirals, birds' lines crossing like paths. Not decorative, personal. You imagine a woman tracing her finger over the base of her jar each morning before lifting it. Not to read, but to remember. The potter's yard has its own kind of silence dance. Living, nothing spoken, yet everything communicating. To others help lift the lid and warm air spills out in a gust, sweet with ash and salt. The jar inside is tall and narrow, made for oil or date wine. The surface glows like polished sand. They set it down carefully on a woven mat to cool, steam rising from its sides like breath. No one applauds. No one names the maker. And yet you can feel the satisfaction in the space between movements. A good piece. A finished thing. The potter leans forward and exhales slowly, as if letting something go. Not pride, not exhaustion. Just time, passing through hands and clay and fire, then out into the world. The old man tilts his head slightly and uses a hooked stick to draw a pot forward from the fire's edge. The old man still watches the kill, but you sense his awareness shift back to earth, back to presence. He does not speak as you leave. He does not need to. His silence is full. Carry it with you as you step away, the warmth of the kill still lingering along your arms. Think of all the things shaped and reshaped in stillness, the way even broken vessels hold light. And as the sounds of the wider village return, voices, carts, birdsong, you hold one last thought gently in your chest. Not everything needs to be perfect to last. Some things endure simply because someone stayed with them long enough. The surface is red hot, trembling slightly as air hits it. He watches. Not every piece survives. Some crack, some warp. But those that endure carry something that cannot be written. Time held in flame, and by the slow movements of those who tend it. There is no uniformity here. No two pieces match perfectly. And yet the mismatched edges and slight variations do not feel like flaws. They feel like memory. The potter finally speaks, not to you, but to the clay. A single word, perhaps a name, or a blessing. You watch him lift a small jug from the ashes, turning it slowly in his hands. The glaze has split near the lip, revealing a narrow vein of darkness. He smiles faintly. He places it to the side, with reverence, not disappointment. This, too, is part of the work. You walk past stacked amphory jugs and shallow dishes, some newly shaped, others waiting to be born from the kiln's breath. Near the center of the courtyard, a round mud brick oven stands open, its mouth ringed with soot, its belly glowing faintly red. An old man sits beside it on a low stool, wrapped in a faded shawl, a clay shard resting on his knee. He does not look up, but you can feel his awareness, as if his eyes extend through the fire and back again. You take a seat a short distance away, careful not to disturb the rhythm. You begin to notice the textures, how the clay darkens where the fire licks it most, how some pots still hold the fingerprints of their maker pressed gently, then forgotten. You've heard it said that clay remembers every touch. A pot may forget its shape, but not the hands that shaped it. The old man gestures toward the kill. A final piece is ready. The sun has crested now, washing the yard in gold. You stand quietly, brushing dust from your legs. The boat rocks gently beneath your feet as you drift away from the dock, the rope coiled behind you like a sleeping serpent. The oars creak in slow rhythm, dipped by hands that do not rush. The Nile is wide here, not fierce or loud, but soft, like a breath drawn in and never quite released. You've seen it before, years ago perhaps. You notice one of them glancing toward the western sky where the sun now kisses the line of distant hills. The stars appear one by one, not scattered, but arranged, as if drawn from memory. The river has held you without asking anything. As your feet touch stone again, you feel as if you've been wrenched on of dirt or worry, but of noise. You look back once at the water, the dark curve of the current already hiding the boat from view. It does not wave goodbye, does not need to. The Nile has always known how to keep moving, but it also knows how to keep company. And in that quiet companionship you carry home more than memory, carry a stillness that does not need to be named. Just held. The air cools, and you pull the shawl tighter. You notice how your body has quieted without trying. Your breath has slowed, your shoulders have lowered, your thoughts have loosened their grip. The river has done what it always does, soothed without instruction. Along the far bank, a group of water birds settle into the reeds, necks curled to rest. Somewhere behind you, a jackal calls once and then is silent. It is not eerie, it is simply part of the rhythm. You watch the reflection of the moon stretch across the water in a long, dull, trembling ribbon and realize the Nile reflects not only what is above, but what is forgotten. In ancient days, that was the land of the dead, always westward, always setting. But tonight it looks soft, like a bed just rumpled. You wonder if the dead were ever lonely. If they missed the small things bread left too long on the fire, the hum of a neighbor's song. Perhaps this is why people once floated boats of bread and incense down the Nilt, to remind the ones beyond that life still flowed, still laughed. You close your eyes, and for a moment you feel the river not beneath you but within you. Steady, gentle, patient, or maybe only in dreams. Its no longer tended cobwebs stretch across its small entry, and the paint has peeled from its carved offering basin, but still, it holds shape. Someone left a pot of marigolds here recently. The petals are browning, but their scent is stubborn. Your boat glides past slowly, and you bow your head, not in prayer, but in recognition. There is something beautiful in what remains, even when use is gone, even when names are forgotten. The shrine, like the river, persists not because it demands memory, but because it refuses to vanish. You sit low within the boat's woven hull, a linen shawl across your shoulders, your body still warm from the sun-baked stone of the quay. All around you, the river murmurs. Reeds brushing the hull, birds calling overhead, water lapping at the wood. There is no destination. This is not a journey to somewhere, but a passage through something, an offering of time to the current. The river, after all, has always carried more than water. You lean back, watching the sky soften toward evening. The boat drifts past the remains of old pylons, their broken spines rising from the shallows like stone fingers still pointing home. Once, there were docks here. Markets, singing. You can almost hear it, faint voices calling prices, the clash of pottery, a baby's laughter. All of it gone. All of it held. The Nile remembers everything it touches. It holds no grudges. It changes nothing, but it carries bits of brick, fruit, rind, lost songs. A ring dropped by accident. A vow whispered and never spoken aloud again. You dip your fingers in the water, and for a moment it feels as though something long ago brushes back. There's a small shrine tucked into the riverbank just ahead, barely visible between two bent acacia trees. The oarsmen say nothing. They do not need to. Their hands move as if pulled by time itself. Night begins to bloom above. Eventually, the boat turns, slow and wide, heading back toward the shore. You do not resist. You do not feel arrival as an end. The morning sun is still hidden beyond the horizon as you step into the courtyard one last time. The stone beneath your feet is cool, untouched by heat, and the air holds the stillness of a world not yet awake. You pause for a moment in the doorway, watching the first light shift across the threshold. This place, once filled with dance, with river chant, with laughter inside tombs and whispers beneath stars, now holds only quiet. The garden is waking, but you do not rush to leave. The wind brushes past your arm, and the tree above stirs once more. You walk toward the gate that leads out of the courtyard, passing again the grooves carved into stone by feet you'll never know. You think, maybe, they were just like yours. Curious, tired, hoping to understand something larger than themselves. You step over them gently, not to avoid, but to acknowledge. The past does not need to speak to be heard. It is not behind you now. It is within you. You pass beneath the arch into a light that is no longer memory, but morning. And you carry nothing with you but breath and calm, presence. There is stillness here that deserves to be honored. Stillness not as absence, but as fullness. You think of those who came before, those who shaped pots, danced stories, mapped stars, and realized that their work was not to be remembered. It was simply to be done. Carefully, repeatedly, lovingly. Perhaps that is the real legacy. Not fame, but rhythm. The act of showing up for the small, steady work of living. You look down at your hands, quiet and resting in your lap. They have held no scroll, no staff, no chisel, and yet they have held this story. That is enough, but not the kind that aches. This is the kind of quiet that gathers gently around you, the kind that says, "You've seen enough for now." You walk slowly to the bench beneath the fig tree, the same one that once dropped fruit beside a courtyard of dancers. It is familiar now. You are not a visitor anymore. You are part of its memory. The garden has changed since you first arrived, though no one has moved a stone. A ceramic jar still leans near the well, etched faintly with spiral marks. You remember the clay that cracked but was still held with reverence. The game whose rules were forgotten, yet still played. The tomb that laughed, the river that carried silence. These are not fragments. They are one story told slowly, and you have been listening all this time. The past was never asking you to remember names or dates. It was asking you to feel its weight, to sit beside it. To notice, you let that weight settle, no, not heavily, but warmly. As if draped in linen, long warmed by the sun. A memory, not for your mind, but for your bones. The scent of crushed mint lingers near the wall. Far away, a pair of birds calls across the sky, but the sound is soft, wrapped in air like cotton. You sit, your shoulders lower. And something within you begins to match the rhythm of the garden, the slowness of branches, the hush of earth, the deep breath of still things. You think back to everything, the riddle whispered among reeds, the painted masks worn by hands that remembered, the dancer whose steps drew time in circles, the boat of puppets that floated stories like incense. None of them were loud, none of them rushed. And yet they stayed. Remember the ceiling of stars? How it was painted not to impress, but to measure. The light has shifted. Gold now edges the leaves. You stand now, slowly, without hurry. Maybe we haven't changed as much as we think. Thank you for being here. Sweet dreams.